Good morning, everyone. I'm Alexander von Riesen. I'm from Avensia, where I'm working as an innovation director and senior commerce advisors for our customers. And we at Avensia, we're working with information management and mastering data management for our customers, both in B2B and B2C. I'm going to have a little bit of a retail perspective today. However, this is as valid in a business-to-business domain, or if you're not working with retail. So the talk of the day is data in retail, or retail is data. And I'm going to talk about different data points, different data sources that are contextualized, connected into a data flow, which enables modern retailers to gain advantage over their competitors, to have information faster, more relevant to us as consumers, or as us end users. Now, before diving into basically how you do this as a modern retailer, I'm going to start off with 3 challenges. Well, the first challenge is, how do you take decisions? And well, it's not that hard to take a decision when you wake up in the morning and say, oh, should I wear a white shirt or a blue shirt? But what if you have a lot of information, a lot of data that is in your data storage? How do you take decisions in a world which also requires you to take decisions in a more speedy way? We need to take decisions faster with more data and information and with a more complex landscape to navigate around. So basically, how do you take decisions in this world? Well, do you do it with a gut feeling, like this guy? Waking up and going like, well, I know kind of what works. Maybe we should go for the blue product today instead of the red product. Or I think we should aim all our focus in this business channel rather than this business channel. And we all know the bias of like, oh, I am the boss and this is how I used to work. And how is that driven? Well, gut feeling is okay. However, you need to have an alternative way, and that's being data-driven, of course. And being data-driven enables you to find anomalies in data patterns, looking at what is missing, what can we learn from this, and take away bias discussions around roundtables when you're looking at data or opinions, where you can have structured, quantified data saying what data points to watch out for. And working with dashboards, as we heard previous speakers about, saying that, okay, this is how we should move forward. So the first question is, how do you take decisions? And I would emphasize that you be data-driven. The other one is really interesting. In a world that consists of data and more data, we all know that, okay, what is data really? Well, data is usually the bits and bytes and bobs that you find in the basement usually, right? You have information in computer and systems, but data doesn't really tell us much. It's just, information about an object. Data that is processed, that is when it comes to an information. And that is when we can actionable do things with the information. And I don't know why, but we usually put basement, where we have our data lakes and so on. But based on our data processed into information, then we can talk about an information triangle, where on top of it, we can put information into context. And I think this is the key. Just having data today doesn't mean much. Information needs to be processed, and data needs to be processed. And on top of that, you need knowledge. And knowledge is gained by having information in context, in time, in places, in who is using it. And knowledge is then actionable. We can take action on this. And I'm going to give you an example of this later on. But we have a huge problem today, and it's the amount of data being created. A number that is staggering to me is that during the 2 last years in the world, 90% of all data is created that we have at availability today. There's 2.5 quintillions amount of data. So let's just quickly look at the data points in the world today and how much data we generate. If anybody of you use Twitter, 500 million tweets a day is being tweeted. We're about 4 million people being connected with emails, and that's great. We're sending 300 billion emails a day. So if I'm a marketeer and I'm not reaching my audience, well, that's a piece of information I want to know. And then we can go on, we can look at how many WhatsApp messages are sent today, 65 billion. Of 2 of them is basically video and data. And we can look at how many posts on Instagram there are on videos and images. In total, it's projected by 2025, we will have roughly 463 exabytes of data. What is an exabyte? Well, it's a 1 with a heck of a load of zeros after it, right? And if you thought that is much, with exabyte, learn your data literacy, because you got your zettabytes after your exabytes, and then your yottabytes. To give this into a perspective, what is 463 billion exabytes? Well, if we would fill this room, and I'm not sure it will cover it, with 212 million DVDs, these old records, during one day, for the whole of the year, that's the exabyte amount that we're creating. Such a large amount of data. Now, why do I mention this? Well, corporations have the same challenge today. Corporations have more and more data. We're producing more and more data. We have more and more data that we need to keep track of. So how do you manage data becomes a very relevant question into today's business world. You can have kind of structure to it, and a lot of companies, and it surprises me still in 2019, that I went to a business company the other day, and they were like, well, we have kind of this kind of system that is not really structured, and it's somewhere out there in the data universe, where things are. It's much like, your attic at home, or your basement, or your neighbor's basement. There's a lot of stuff there, but it's not organized and relevant. Or do you want to have it structured? Organized in such a way so it can be categorized, metadata structure, organized so you can retrieve and collect information, and structure it so it becomes relevant for the end user, independently of it is a consumer, a business user, or a partner of us. So by looking at this, where do we start? Well, one interesting point when it comes to retail is to say, oh, it's an early morning, I'm in the product department, I walk in, I grab a cup of coffee, and there's a new product created. Either at the design department or at the purchasing department, somewhere is a new product. And when we talk about product, then we talk about something we need to start working with. Well, it's a design department, we start with a sketch, and then we populate systems as we move along. And it's interestingly enough to say, when we create something, any data object, it's the birthplace of data. And now we can start understanding, okay, what questions should we ask around this? And I've been fascinated since about 1995 when I started work around internet and data. It's about what information do we want to know about what information? The meta question. So where is this data being published? Who is publishing it? In what system? Where does it need to go after? How is the data lifetime management cycle around this data? How is it being enriched? By what system in what stage? That is crucial to find out. And is this done in an unplanned, unstructured, kind of ad hoc way? We have different systems where we usually populate data, we make a backup of something, but we don't really have an alternative. Or are you meticulously working with a planned structure where you know where it's published, where it's residing, how it's being processed, by whom or by what system adds what functionality to this kind of data? So we step by step get a structured, organized way. So in a world where we have an exponential growth of data at the moment, we need to start thinking about seriously how we do structuring of our data. And I will come back to that, not just in a manual way, but in an automatic way. We need to think about basically how do we plan the whole data flow from the suppliers on one end through our entity through the receivers on the other end, as consumers or as users. And the third one, of course, we need to be data-driven. And it's amazingly, in all these meetings that I go into, that people are so less data-driven. They're still using on, who is the boss or who is having the most volume in the room saying, I'm thinking this, right? And we have all these biases. So this is important. On top of this, to challenge the retailer in today's business world even more, you need to do this multi-domain mastering data management in a multi-channel world. Meaning that you have a central system, you have spokes around it, and you have different hubs. And these hubs are represented by touch points. In the retail world, that's a touch point in the store, in the mobile phone, at home, at your computer. But all these different touch points need to be orchestrated so you can, from the central data brain, send out information when it's needed to these touch points. And I'll go into this a little bit further more in a second. So we have these three questions that we need to address. So how do businesses and modern retailers address this in an effective way? Well, it's easy. I've let these game pieces illustrate content and choose these colors to represent what we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of connections that for a retailer is relevant. And I'm sure in your business, you're going to look and say, okay, these data points and these data sources and objects are relevant for me, and to handle them in a context. So I'm going to zoom in on three things. First one is the product. The product is important because, again, we have an SKU number, stock keeping unit, we have a name of the product, we have a pricing of that product, and that information usually resides in the enterprise resource planning system. Then you want to make sure that this product has imagery, and yesterday it was nice to have a flat imagery. Now these days you have a 3D image that needs to be, hyper realistic for the consumer to be able to turn the shoe and see it in multiple dimensions, and preferably a video to it as well, so you can place it in context. Now, products are fine alone, and then you need to say, okay, what systems are we connecting to this? But then you need to focus on another thing. These products need to be in time and in place. So you want to basically say, okay, what touch points, where geographically do I want to place this information? So you have the product, and now you can put it into a geographic spot or a touch point and say, okay, what information, how should these two interact? And last but not least, you need to connect that to a third point, and that is us as consumers or us as users. Which user is looking at what information, at what touch point, in what place in time are they looking? So these three entities by themselves are not telling us much. Again, it's just data and information. But placed in context, then we have an actionable, insightful result based on knowledge. So we've talked about data entities and data objects. And I'm sure for your business, whatever business you're in, if you're not a retailer, you probably could find out, okay, is it my partners, is it my users, is it my systems and machines that I need to talk to? I met with Starbucks the other day, and they are having these coffee machines that are Internet of Things enabled, and that, of course, enables even bigger data growth. And their machines are one of these data bobs that they connect now to understand what coffee is being served where, how much maintenance do we need in each machine, how are they running, and so forth. If we tilt this view 45 degrees and look from another perspective of what things successful businesses manages today, we can look up some other points. And one of them is data scalability. If we're working today in a retail world where we have Amazon, Nike, and our competitors like that, we need to scale and make sure that the systems we're working with are scalable. So we can add on data in a way that we can grow the business constantly. And if we have data scale, then we also can look at business scale. So from a business perspective, I, as an information manager or master data manager, I get objectives from my business department, usually the business development department, that says, we come up with a new business model right now. We need to connect more suppliers, we need to put them into new channels, we need to open up, like pop-up shops and so forth, and you need to support this. So a modern retailer today is working both with data scale to support the business scale. Then, of course, having this, and we at Avensia, we work with our customers with something we call unified commerce. And unified commerce is basically unified information management. You want these systems to talk with each other, to talk and give you as an information manager or as a business analyst a 360 holistic view of each and every data point. So we don't have these single siloed systems anymore. We have a coherent system that gives us data information in a rich and relevant way. And last but not least, if you have these information masses that we need to, adapt and digest as human beings, you need to make this automated. Work with AI or with image recognition to categorize, to meta tag, to use these operations in the most efficient way. So these four objects, basically data scale, business connectivity, and working with AI and having everything in a unified way, you need to make sure that you have this for every data object that you're working with. Another way of looking at this, and I think this is interesting when it comes to systems, and we're a lot of our systems enablers out there saying, well, these are system requirements. You as an end consumer or as a business user, I think the demands you should put on any system is, of course, the format, the out-of-the-box format that this system will deliver. Because one thing is for sure, yesterday's world covered, well, we have a comma-separated value file that we could get out and export and import data. But we need to connect this in an ever-fasting world today. So you make sure that you have Excel spreadsheets, you want to have JSON connectivity and so forth of your data. You want to make sure that it's basically driven so you can connect your suppliers to your system, to your front-end channels again, so you can interact more with suppliers and with more suppliers and with more distributors as well and new channels. And third but not least, you want to make this into an ecosystem. More and more businesses today are breaking the traditional way of operating from a silo environment, not just in their own systems, but in the supply chain where you have one supplier going to a supplier, to another supplier or distributor, to us and to an end consumer or a retailer. They're breaking that up into a multi-domain world, also with different actors working together, exchanging information in a more rapid way. So basically, when we have all this information, as a retailer, how do we basically distribute it in a most effective way? And I don't know if one of you are working with user journeys, because in retail we're working with retail journeys or customer journeys. And when you're looking at a customer journey, I think that's the most effective way to start off with when you say how they're going to use this data and where. And a customer journey starts somewhere, you know, and then continues, and I won't go into the bits and bobs of a customer journey because I think you're aware of that. But if you look at it, so the interesting point today is not just what we can give the customer, but also what we can extract from the customer. So basically, does the customer start in the store? And what information, when you are visiting our stores, can we pick up to basically continue our data knowledge about you? So when you then come home and you browse to your computer, what can we give for information then? And then continue this with interactions over the mobile phone. And then basically the mobile phone interacts in between and also in the stores. But the best thing about this is that we can, as retailers, gain this information from our consumers and better give them the information they want. So basically, this was valid before just for one customer journey. This is not valid for one customer journey anymore. We need to start segmenting it. So basically this maybe is Ruth. She's 42 years of age. She has 2 children. She works in a suburb. She lives in the city and does her grocery shopping. Well, that is a whole complete segment to this guy. His name is Bob. He's looking for records. He's a single guy. He's having different interests. And as an informatier, that was like, oh, great, you just need to segment it. Today's world is being hyper-personalized. We need to make sure that information is not just longer at one point to one customer, but also where in time the customer is. I'm a first-time customer. So I will see the website I'm visiting in a way that you as a returning customer are not seeing it. And the next time I interact with the website, I get new information based on my previous behavior. So by orchestrating all these different data sources, data objects, and data points, we're able to map all this, all the contents, connect them in a real-time, architected way, so that the retailer today, a modern retailer, can build what we call the retail data brain, where data is connected with information that gives them actionable insights around what they should do next when they take critical decisions. And why this is important? I think the important thing is that we human beings have a longer and longer longevity span in average. We're getting older and older and enjoy that. Well, the interesting part with companies is that during the last 75 years, the average lifespan of a company has gone from 65 to 15 years. So the change have higher stakes when you take wrong decisions. So what does great data enable us to do? Great decision making, as we know. One of my favorite stories comes from Skype. Great product. I think you all have used it over your lifetime, more or less. And if you've used Skype, you say, well, of course it should be there. In the beginning, Skype had a problem. We downloaded Skype, but nobody started using it. We had a churn. Everybody said, well, nice product, we churn it. Then a data manager came up to the management team and said, guys, I have a number. 7 is the magical number. When you had more than 7 friends sitting around the table, you didn't churn, right? So if you downloaded Skype and 7 friends joined you, you started using it. For us as a sales department or marketing department or business department, the best data decision we could take ever. So gear the whole product to making sure that we have more than 7 friends, because then we didn't churn. Great data enables, of course, e-commerce growth, because we get more and more insights about what the customer wants and what information we can give them. So that means that we have less returns, which is good for sustainability reasons. We have more co-selling with products that are needed for the customer, and we can have greater average transaction value. We can have a supply chain efficiency where we can onboard, and I think this is the key, onboard more suppliers faster and with less time, so we can have more products. And more products is relevant, but not just more products, also more suppliers. Then we have governance and control. We need to make sure that the information we have is stored in such a way so we can retrieve it easily if a customer wants it, again with the GDPR. But it's also important to make sure that, for instance, when you work in different markets, so within Germany, you make sure that, oh, there's a double opt-in that we need to have as an information for a German consumer when they want to register. And of course, in the end, this enables us to have great customer experience, because we as customers, we don't want to have irrelevant information, we want to have relevant information. So this enables the data leaders of today that are working with this, like Nike and Amazon, to make really interesting things. Basically, they can have online driving their offline stores. And most of you are aware of Amazon, but Nike does something really good in New York in their stores at the moment. They're looking at what sells online and what is the predictions to sell next week. And then they populate the basement and their ground level in their 7-story floor with those products. So I, as a New Yorker, can swiftly go in and grab this fall jacket, and it's right there in the first aisle, rather than having to go up to the 5th department store. I mean, I'm visiting Åhléns here in Stockholm, or NK, and it will be interesting when they start using this. And like when I go in the basement floor, it's the relevant products. Now, there's an interesting thing happening now. We have all this data, and we as consumers, when Gartner asked us, do we want to give this data away to a retailer? Hell no. They said, no, we don't. We as consumers don't want to give data. We want to keep our privacy. At the same time, when you ask the same cohort of people in this investigation, do you want personalized offering? And do you want relevant? Yes, we want that, right? So a retailer today, according to Gartner and according to me as well, is having to have this fine balancing act, saying how much information do I want to extract from you, and how much personalization do I want to do? Because this is a dual-edged sword, basically. One of the things, and I think the CEO of Untitled, if you read this, just secondly, says, is that with all this data, we don't need to show it. We don't need to basically put in our faces that we have all this data around you as a consumer. We're well aware of it, but we can use it in a very intelligent way. So data drives everything they do. And there's a lot of talk here today about AI as well. And what I think is interesting with data, and especially data in these areas with prediction, forecast trends, supply chain, and so forth, is that these areas are really good in applying data in a processed way, in information. And if data is math, which it is in the end with algorithms, then in the end, I would say AI wins. So rather, if you're a large shoe reseller and trying to predict like how many shoes should we bring in which areas in Sweden to which stores, AI is going to do those predictions better in a couple of years, I think, than us human beings. And I said this talk is about data is retail or retail is data. This is an example of an AR, augmented reality app, so you can look at a shelf in real time when I'm walking in the store and see what products are hot and selling in the store and moving and which products are not. And I think this has been an unprecedented way of now being very, very data-driven. So by mastering data in retail, well, first of all, you'll be able to sell more, and that's something that is really interesting, or have more relevant data. You can do it in different channels, from the mobile to the store to the web. You can have it personalized to the shopper, and you can have it in an easier way. So what are the results of this? Some of the customers that we have worked with, and the partners we're working with, is Guitar Center. They've gone to time to market from 12 to 4 days with their new product information system. They've been able to double the amount of SKUs they're able to handle. And this is interesting because, of course, it means that operations moves easier and faster. We have Ultra Beauty, which is a beauty cosmetic brand, and they've also seen a really big uplift, not just in time to market, but in productivity gains. Basically, us as co-workers can do more intelligent work rather than just populating data. What I also think is really interesting, and here's a third example in Nordstrom, they're able to gain productivity gains. But furthermore, because Nordstrom has data, are very data-driven, they're now looking at new formats of their whole stores. Because if we had a huge store before, what are we going to do now when we are data-driven and have so much information? Well, we can introduce Nordstrom Local that enables whole different store concepts. Here you can go in, have a personalized tailor and shopper. So when you get the garments, you can alter them according to my fit. You can have a martini or an espresso in the shop as well, or a glass of wine, depending on the alcohol laws in your country, of course. Here in Sweden, it would be probably a bit challenging. But it's impacting now just not the data management, it's also implicating the store formats. And of course, we all know, from a retail perspective, and that's probably mainly retail-driven, a customer that interacts in multiple stores and through multiple channels, they convert more. So, in basic, what I've talked about here is basically, we want to have a system that creates and captures information, that we're sure that we have created it and captured it in a relevant way. We want to make sure that it's connected, because if it's isolated, if you're sitting in islands like here, make sure that when you go out, mingle with each other, interconnect, as much as your data should do and in your information. You need to coordinate this and orchestrate it from the supplier point through our entity into the different channels and make sure it's real time. You need to control, because without control, if you get requirements from a GDPR perspective or a legal perspective, you won't have governance. So I like to have control over my data. You need to make this cloud-driven, because whatever you're saying, you need data scalability and you need business scalability, and cloud enables us to do this. And of course, last but not least, I usually say when I'm speaking that today's world is continuous. It's 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, and you need to make constant change and move forward in a very, very business hostile environment. And this platform is one of the platforms that is out there today, Riesen, that we're working with from Avensia, and we're a partner. And we love information management, and we love mastering data management, regardless, of course. So if you have time in the break later on, please join me or my colleagues, have a cup of coffee, challenge us around data management and information management. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or send me or my colleagues an email. And if there is questions, I'm unfortunately more or less run out of time. I have 1 minute to the next speaker, but come on down to our booth and challenge us and question us about the details, because as you said, 5%, more or less, I've given out my knowledge, so it's 90% left. Thank you very much.